Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people to combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive actions. Today's guest is Mark Ashby. Mark is a highly regarded specialist who assists international companies and their leaders in crisis awareness, cultural change, and high-performance leadership. He has displayed an extraordinary ability to perform optimally under stressful scenarios through extensive experience as a member of the Elite Paratroopers and other specialist roles in the Australian Army with operational tours of East Timor. Mark was deployed in the Middle East as a team leader in a highly dangerous private security sector for 11 years in Iraq. Mark's adaptability to extreme situations of crisis and armed conflict allowed him to oversee operations of the highest global, financial, and geopolitical importance, such as the first two independent elections in Iraq. Since returning to the corporate sector and setting up his own consulting firm in Australia, Mark has been using his experience to assist senior members of multinational companies in high-performance leaders, crisis awareness, and cultural change so they can become more resilient and adaptable. So please welcome to the show, Mark Ashby. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks very much for that intro, Bob. Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. And why don't we get started? Let's tell the audience about you. How did you get to where you are? We talked about a little bit in your bio. And for those that are listening, Mark does smile, even though that bio is pretty serious. Seems like a fun guy. So tell us about you and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, look, essentially, I'm a Sydney boy. I grew up in my whole life in Sydney at the beach. So when I was a young guy, I basically was surfing by the time I was 5 years of age, and that was my real life.
Uh-huh.
I was doing surfing competitions by the time I was sort of 10 years of age, and that was my life right into in my 20s. And I did a lot of traveling with that and competing around Australia and a little bit overseas. And I got to that point in my life where I had to really make some decisions. So I think I shocked my father one day by telling him that I was thinking about joining the military. I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I always had that bit of a fascination with it. So off I went. And to, I suppose, be a guy from the beach to go and do that was a bit of a different thing. Yeah. So I think a lot of my friends were as shocked as what my family was, but I'm pretty determined with most things I do in life, and I wanted to see it through and stick with it and give it that real opportunity. So I did that and had a wonderful time. I got to do some, like you said, a couple of tours of East Timor, and then I got the opportunity to go to the Middle East as a private contractor. I intended to go there for maybe a year, and then head back to Australia and back into the military. And this was a time when everything was so big and built up in Afghanistan, Iraq, with the towers coming down, and it was such a change in all of our lives. Yeah, and not just in the States, it affected all of us. And 11 years later, I came home, and it was an amazing time, amazing experience. And like we spoke about before, I did a lot of time with the United States Army over there. Yeah, and did a bit of time over there embedded with the Green Berets, and even a little bit of advising with the State Department. I was at one of the U.S. embassies for a couple of years. Oh, wow. One of the cities in Iraq, which is for an Australian, that's a really, it's a really rare occasion for that to happen, to even get State Department cleared. Yeah, really, really rare. Yeah, okay. And to have all those US IDs. But it was an amazing experience over there, and you see the best and the worst, I suppose, of humanity. You experience the extreme highs and extreme lows, but I had an amazing team of guys over there that I had underneath me for years, and fantastic guys, and they made my life very, very easy. Wow! It's like being almost like being in an elite sports team every single day. Yeah. You've got these incredible operators that know their job. They're the best at it, and it was a pleasure to be part of, to be honest. And I just steered that ship. I ended up finishing off with a few years in the Australian Embassy in Baghdad as a coast protection team leader there, looking after our ambassador. And then I came back to Australia, and I actually went back to university as well. Went to university at 48 years of age to do my master's degree. Okay. Which was terrifying. Yeah. I was more terrified going to university at my age and being put straight into a master's degree. Yeah. Than what I was over in the Middle East, and juggled that with starting my own firm in the corporate world, and that's where I've been sort of ever since.
Well, great. And again, thank you for your service, for what you've done. I know that's that's a lot of, like you said, the ups and downs and what that how that affects your whole life. It's really something. So thank you for your service, not only for the U.S. side, but from the Australian side. I'm sure people appreciate that. One of the things you talk about, obviously, is leadership, and you help organizations with that. Is leadership being adaptable? Is it more adaptability? Tell us a little bit about that, if you could.
Oh, I think leadership has so many different, I suppose, faces. I think even at the small end of the spectrum, if you're leading a team of 10, men and women these days in both roles, or whether you're, a CEO of a corporation that has 1,000 staff, I think for me, leadership is really displaying that face, is actually being in that environment, not hiding away, actually being front and center and leading from the front, so to speak. And I think especially in that corporate world, it's about leaders actually, like I said, being there and being visible to their staff, and actually, showing that they actually care about the business, and, being part of it, not forgetting where they came from. I think too many leaders I find these days, they really forget where they came from. They started out and why they did it, why they started, and I ask a lot of them that, do you still love what you do? Do you still actually like what you do?
Yeah.
And because it's so important, rather than just hiding away. And it's such a crucial thing, but it's a really, I think you've got to be very, very adaptable in that leadership role, especially in the new age. I think things are different now to when I was maybe growing up. I think the whole world has really changed, obviously with social media now, and we're all connected. So you've got to, you are visible.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of different, movements now and changes, and a lot of the young kids expect different things now. A lot more women in leadership is what there was in the old days, which I think is a fantastic thing. Me personally, I've worked under a couple of amazing female leaders. I looked after a lady ambassador for 4 years in the Middle East, and she was a fantastic woman. So yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, but I think you've got to definitely be very adaptable these days.
And you bring up a good point too, is getting out there to be seen. And, we can see all the stuff on social media. That's not necessarily what we mean, but be seen by the people you lead. Don't hide behind the office. Don't stay on the top floor, wherever you are. Get out there. I always think of, I forget the author that talked about it. Go for a walk and walk through your organization. There's people that haven't seen, call center staff, or don't know exactly what they do. And I always think it's interesting that one show that's out, I don't know if they have in Australia, but where the owner of a business, goes into cognito and infiltrates the business in different sectors, to, learn about the business and see the things that go on a daily basis. And you bring up some great points with that idea. How can leaders basically, if you will, if maybe they have a toxic value or something like that, how can they be more adaptable and get that out of their system, if you will, so it doesn't affect the people they lead?
The one thing that I do personally is that when I go into an environment, if I've got a business leader that contacts me and they've got an issue, you've got to identify first, what the issue is. Is the issue with that person, or is the issue with the business? Is it below them in that middle management or their board? And you've got to have that buy-in from them. You've got to have them on board. That's the first thing that's most important. If you don't have their buy-in, then to get to the bottom of that problem is going to be very difficult. And if you do have that from them, it's going to make it a lot easier. And I like to get into their personal space a bit. It's what I've always done. I know some people say that it's not as good to be personal in that business arrangement and with your people as much, but I'm not like that. I like to really find out who they are, where they came from, even what their family life is like, and identify is the problem coming from home, right, and going into their business life. And it doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a 4-star general. We all have our insecurities and our issues, and I've seen that at the highest level. And I think working with those people overseas for years helped me to identify that, and it made me not as, I suppose, scared to approach those sort of people. Where some people in that corporate world, I find that they're maybe a little bit scared to go and talk to somebody in the board or the CEO. They're a bit rattled by that. Where I think people from the military, especially with that specialist background, they just like, yeah, I don't care about that. I just care about, getting to the problem and finding out who you are. And that's how I try and identify it. take them a bit away from the business, remove them from that environment into their personal space, and then you can build it back up from there. So that's how I try and do it.
And that's another great point there, because I often talk to corporate groups, and sometimes you got to remind them the people working for you are people first. And like you said, you don't need to be afraid of going to somebody in a boardroom. They put their pants on just like everybody else. They have a first name just like everybody else. And yeah, it's they're people. Okay, say hi. How are you? Shake their hand. See how their kids are doing.
I think it's a great point. I think if you do that, and the people that work for you, they're going to love you.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than having a great leader. You'll follow those people anywhere. Yeah. And I had some amazing leaders overseas, on the job in the Middle East, and like I said, you follow those people anywhere, and they don't. I think the real, and that's going to then affect productivity. It's going to affect everything with the bottom line with the business too.
Yeah, the morale. I mean, when you have a leader that is going to have your back, and you're there for them, it just makes everything so much easier. And even when you go through hard times, it's kind of fun. That's what's crazy, is that type of leadership can allow fun in a work environment.
And yeah, if you can enjoy going to work, like you said, if you can enjoy going to work on a Monday morning, whether you've got your own business or whether you're working for somebody, it makes life so much easier. If you can actually enjoy getting up, going to work, rather than going to work Monday morning and you're waiting for Friday afternoon already. And that's the environment you do not want with your people. You want them to enjoy going there, and they're going to be so much happier, and they're going to be more productive. It's so simple.
Yeah. But as Jim Rohn used to say, simple things are easy to do, but they're also easy not to do. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
So what is, if you will, the new meaning? You mentioned the new meaning in some of your material of leadership. What is that?
Like I said, I think it's just been that big shift now, where you had a bit of an old, I suppose we'll call it a bit of an old boys mentality, where you had a lot of boards, very male dominated back in the day. And I think there's been a definite shift with a lot more of a feminine approach to it. And even I think the way of thinking, I do a lot of, with my own program, a lot of talk of the masculine and feminine. I break that down. And I don't mean male and female. I mean in the way we go about things, that male approach of being very straightforward, very head on, doing as much as you can, to more of that female approach where you're looking left and right. Mm-hmm. Maybe sculling back a little bit with your workload, not doing these crazy hours in the week. Doing these, but just maybe scaling it back a little bit and having a bit of a look left and right in your own environment, and really making people sort of think along those lines. I have another part of my program where it's very based on that whole negative and positive attitude of decisions. So basically taking the emotion out of decisions.
Yeah.
Rather taking things that on an emotional concept, and where you're maybe putting on somebody in that business who's one of your buddies, as opposed to actually putting the right person on, and looking at that every aspect of big decisions has a negative and a positive connotation. You always naturally think that if you maybe have a leader that leaves who's maybe got that bit of a toxic value, everyone's going to be cheering. Yes, it's fantastic, that person's gone, we can't believe it. But what is the negative of that person leaving?
Right.
Do they handle all of your big contracts and the tenders? Do they have all those contacts? And who's going to replace them? So there's always that shift, and that's how we ran our missions overseas. We always took the emotion out of it and looked at the left and right of arc, as we say, to get that best, to make that best decision. And I think that's really, it sort of basically brings out that effective leader as well.
And that's another great point, because I always think of it like accounting. Accounting is just numbers. They're not emotional. They're black and white. You don't want to have the red ones. You want the black ones. But, same thing with this, is if you can take the emotion out of a lot of these decisions, it doesn't, like you said, you get the right person in the job. And that's critical for the organization. It can be critical for what you do, who you are. That's a great reminder to people. Let's get the right, if John Gordon would say, is get the right people in the right seats in the bus. So that's a good scenario there.
Yeah, very, very important. Very important to have the right people there. And it's amazing. I'll often find people especially in a big firm that's got a big staff workplace there, that you'll find these incredibly skilled people there, and they're maybe they're a little bit quiet, a little bit shy. And I find it when I go and do like a talk in a boardroom, you'd always have that couple of alphas. You'd always have that middle group, the big group that's all chatty and talky and laughing, and then you'll have a couple of quiet people. And it's always incredible to find those little gems. And you'll find in that boardroom environment, they won't talk as much, but you'll get them out of there. Maybe you're catching up in their coffee room. Yeah. And I like to get into who they are and find out, okay, who are you? What's your background? And sometimes you're like blown away by like, so what do you do here? And then when you actually go to that person you're dealing with about, their staff and their promotional sort of line, you're like, do you realize these people you've got here that you don't even use? Yeah. And they get overlooked all the time because they're not part of that little clique. And it blows me away sometimes.
Wow. It's like high school all over again.
It is. It's grown up high school, isn't it? Yeah. But unfortunately, it's just how life is, and it's sad sometimes that it never changes. It's great when you find them, but it's what they do with them, and do they have that's the first thing I identify in that business. Do you have a system here to identify your own people, right? For promotions and for even moving left and right, getting the best out of them. So important.
And as I was reminded the other day in a meeting, your development plan is your responsibility. We all got to remember that. That's our responsibility. If we want to go for that, we do got to let people know we're interested. We got to talk to more people. You got to build network. You got to show people work you've done and how you've adapted to that. Those are all key things. And when you're looking at those leaders, you may, like you said, you may not know that person directly, but when you see they've done certain things that are key to what you want in a role, maybe you need to talk to that person. So that's part of stepping out. So one of the big things that I noticed too with what you do in your website and so forth is crisis management. And, the idea of that is really something, because that deals with the positive, the negative. Obviously with a crisis, a lot of times it's a negative feeling. I'm sure there's positive crises, if there's such a thing, hurry up and get the birthday cake for somebody, or, whatever that may be. But how do you help people run that, manage that path, leaders manage that path of, crisis scenarios?
Yeah, it's the same thing. You've got to have that. I know I keep going back to that buy-in, first and foremost with any crisis. And is it, like you said, is it a crisis inside of the business? Is it a staff retention issue where you're losing so many staff and you're thinking, why are we losing all these great people? Or is it like in an environment with, say, like a cyber incident? You've actually had some sort of cyber attack. Right. And my position, I go on there to make them aware of what their own vulnerabilities are. Basically, I'll look at their own systems and see where they're going to be vulnerable. And it's like, do you actually have the ability here? And it's sort of more like that crisis awareness, where can you keep functioning when you have some sort of an attack? What level of your business keep functioning tomorrow if you have a big incident today, whether it's physical or whether it is actually something we can't see, like some sort of cyber attack from a foreign state actor or something. Right. And I think a lot of big firms these days, it's not a matter of if, it's when they're going to get a hack. That's just a given now, especially if you're some part of a big government installation or something like this. And it's just making them aware. I do also that physical side of things, where I go in there and I help them out with that critical incident, almost armed offender sort of active shooter stuff as well. I know it's a very sensitive issue in the States right now. And it breaks my heart. And
it's a shame we have to do that, but it's a good thing you offer that, because it's
it's very close to my heart, that sort of thing. Yeah, and it's my bread and butter. I have steered away from that a little bit, but I still do it. And it's and I just give them that opportunity, to actually do something, or to make them think about, what's going on. I give them that chance, I suppose, rather than just panicking. I open their mind up to, these are the scenarios. This is what to expect. I get to the nitty gritty with it. I don't muck around. It's got to be a little bit brutal. This is what can happen, and this is what it's like, and this is how loud it is, and this is how you've got to react and give yourself that opportunity of either getting yourself out there or hiding, or when to run, when to hide, when to fight, things like this. And I think it's very important. And if I can instill in one person in that organisation, maybe the chance is going to give them a chance, well, then that's a good day out.
Well, and there's interesting pieces of what you just said, because being in the military, it was loud, it was fearful. I'm sure thoughts can run through your head every which way, but you don't have time to, or if you will, think of that. You got to focus on mission, focus on point. Are we, to survive? And you're allowing people to be able to do that sometimes in a controlled environment, but you're showing them the reality of what could be because you've experienced that. Do you see a lot of people understanding what you've gone through and how that affects how you teach concepts, how you show them these concepts?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that's a bit of a habit, I suppose, yourself you can't get out of. And especially going into that corporate world, you've got to change your mindset a little bit. You've got to be a bit more understanding of people. You've even got to, even description, like, talking in acronyms and things, you've got to really break it down. And I mean, it's a bit of a skill that I've learned over the years, and something that I think I'm pretty good at, and I've been told I'm okay at it, is breaking down the complex and putting it down into that simple variant. I can really do that quite well. If somebody can't understand something, I can break it down for them into real layman's terms. And I give them that whole mindset of ours of working under pressure, working under extreme pressure. And I know you've probably heard the military term that's, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. But it's such a true thing where you can slow time down a little bit, have a think about it, take a breath, and give yourself an opportunity. Because if you're running or if you're panicking in any situation in life, you're not thinking clearly. No. If you're moving deliberately and you're moving quick but deliberately and giving yourself little pauses, it gives you time to react and time to think about what's going on, because it may be something that's extremely loud. But that's the real big one that I do, is working under pressure. And learn to slow time down, give yourself that best opportunity of making the correct decision. Because in my old world, if we made a mistake, you can't reset.
Yeah.
Sure, you might go back after the mission and say, okay, how do we do it better next time? Or, how can we fix that issue we did today? But maybe you've had one of your guys killed in that situation.
Right.
And this happened in reality for us overseas, where we lost a lot of our people. And it's such a mindset that you've got to overcome, where especially if you're a team leader, if you're leading that group of people, if you lose somebody or somebody gets badly injured, you've got to live with that. And especially if you've made that decision that in yourself, you think, oh, I've made a real mistake there. You've got to live with that for the rest of your life. And maybe their families, their wives or their children, their mums and dads, and you've got to go back and face that. So it's very important. And this is what I say to people in the corporate world, even leaders. It's okay if you make a mistake, because you do get the opportunity to reset the next day. Okay. But you've got to learn also from your mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. We all make them, and don't belittle your people, have their back. And if they make a mistake, then you back them and say you don't do it again. And that's a lot of those, I suppose, a lot of those teachings that I've learned that I still bring with me today.
That reminds me of a story about Jack Welch when he was coming up through the ranks in GE, and he thought for sure he did something and made a decision in profits in one division that he was running, went down into the toilet and went in to see the senior vice president. He thought for sure he was getting fired, and he said, no, I just spent that's a $350,000 education for you. He was like,
huh?
Wow. So he got an opportunity. But like you said, in the civilian world, we get those opportunities, and it's interesting you say that, to slow down and take a moment. And like you said, you've got to be able to do that, because our society today is so high pressure. Everything's running at 900 miles a minute. And, we've got to be able to make crucial decisions fairly quickly. And, it could be costly, it could not. And we've got to be able to live with those decisions and know the ramifications of those. So great insight with that, because that helps people, I think, to look ahead as well as look at now, like you said, left and right. Okay, what are we doing? How's this going to work out? Take a minute and, we, continue to move. I find that interesting with your background too. You continue to move. You always had to keep going. You didn't have time to really, like you said, as a leader, if you lost a guy, you had to live with that, but you couldn't stop mission.
Yeah, I think you've got to deal with those emotions later on.
Yes.
Because at the time on that role, you've got to then be seen by your own people that you're still leading, that you still, because they're looking to you to be that person.
Right.
So you can't crumble. And we're all the same. When you have somebody above you, you're looking to that person for a bit of inspiration and that leadership. And they're the ones that are supposed to be the whether it's a great male or female leader, you're looking to them for that direction. And what do we do now?
Right.
And when you're in that environment, especially in that high pressure, it really dawned on me years ago when I first started. I was like, holy moly, I'm in charge now.
Yeah.
I'm in charge of these people, and I've got these, and I call them souls. I've got these souls underneath me now, and wow, this is a big responsibility, bigger than I ever thought it would be.
Right.
And because it's such a, when it's life and death, it really makes you, I suppose, perform to the optimum of what your abilities are. You have to. You can't take shortcuts. You've got to do everything to its it's 100%, to your best of your abilities to get those missions completed. And I know in the corporate world it's different, because you're going to have all your KPIs, and you're going to have these targets you've got to meet, and there's all that pressure to go. But sometimes it's good to just take that like I said, that step back. Just breathe a little bit and think it's just the right option that I'm taking, rather than just rushing into it, not knowing even what you're doing half the time, and just making a decision on a whim and maybe a bit of hope. And I can't stand that word hope, because it's you can hope for rain or hope for sun. That's a little bit different. But when you're hoping something in the business world to change, it's like, well, you're living on a bit of a a bit of a fallacy, aren't you?
You're in control of a lot of that, for the most part. You can control some of that. You can't always control everything. And I think that's part of the realization of that too, is we don't have control over many things in our life, and we have to be acceptant of that.
Yeah.
So, that's something. Why is leadership about the heart and the mind, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's how we did it. Once again, I'll go back to a bit overseas, but we call that whole hearts and minds approach. It's just about, like you touched on earlier, it's getting to know your people. Yeah. It's such a little thing to get out and about and walk around every now and then and just go and sit down with people and see what they're doing, find out about who they are. And I had a great leader overseas as one of our politicians, and he's ex 4-star general in the Australian Army, and he was technically my boss in the Army, and he became our Governor General, and he was overseas with us, and just such a great guy, where he would get to know you and talk about your families, and even if you saw him 6 months later, he might not remember your name, but he'd remember who you were, and how are your kids going, and things like this. Yeah, and that's, to me, really, and at such a senior level, of the country, pretty much, he's pretty much sort of second or third in charge of the country, really.
Wow.
And it really gave me that whole mindset of, I never ever not want to be, not like him. If that makes sense. Right. You want to be like him. And I think in any environment, that hearts and minds approach, you've got to be smart with your business, of course, as a leader, but there's nothing greater. And that legacy that you leave, the people they're revered for years, but they're spoken about for years after they've left. And I say to a lot of CEOs or board members I work with, I actually say to them, what legacy do you want to leave once you're gone? How do you want to be remembered? I say it to them, and it makes them really spit out. Do you want to be remembered as a great leader here, and someone who's revered years after you've left? Because we all leave eventually. Yeah. Or do you want to be someone who was just disliked and despised? And I said, that's the reality. Yeah. And maybe some of them, they don't care about that, but a lot of them, it makes them really flip their mindset a little bit and really think about how they want to be remembered.
Right. And that's a good reminder for people. What's the legacy it's always interesting when I hear that. What's the legacy you want to leave behind? Because eventually somebody's going to be talking about you while you're in a box. So,
oh yeah.
None of us get around that, what are the words you want them to say, and how do you want to be remembered? So
absolutely.
That's great. Well, Mark, where can people find out more about what you do? How can they get a hold of you? Because we want to make sure that they've got that information about, your website and things like that.
Yeah, my website, very simple. It's just markashbyconsulting.com. So it's Mark with a K. and they find me on my my business email, which is mark@markashbyconsulting.com. So nice and simple. And yeah, they shoot me an email. I've even got a free masterclass on my website they can listen to.
Wow.
It's no gimmicks. So just have a listen to that. And yeah, I'd love to have a chat to anybody who wants to get in touch with me, and I can see where they're at, and I can help them. Absolutely.
Well, that would be great. We'll put all that in the show notes too. We'll spell it out for people so they've got the visual of it as well, so they can watch this later. For those on the audio, you heard it, markashbyconsulting.com, and we'll put that out there in the information that we post. So, Mark, I just want to say thank you again for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for enlightening us. And again, thank you for your service, for what you've done for your country and for our country. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for that, Bob. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks again.
Thank you. You have a great day.
See you later.